You walk into a kitchen in Lancaster County at 5 in the morning. The wood stove is dark and cold. There is no electric oven. There is no gas range. There is no glowing red element, no preheat beep, no digital timer counting down. And yet the entire room is full of the smell of bread. Real bread. Crust the color of polished mahogany. The kind your grandmother used to pull out of an oven before anyone told you bread came from a plastic bag at the supermarket. The woman of the house pulls a long-handled wooden peel from a hook on the wall and slides 8 loaves out of a small arched opening in the back of the chimney. That opening leads into a hump of clay and fieldstone that looks more like part of the masonry than a piece of equipment. It is. Her father-in-law built it in 1962 for $30. It has baked over 40,000 loaves. It has never been replaced. It has never broken. There is no element to burn out. There is no thermostat to fail. There is no warranty, because the warranty would be a joke. The thing will outlast the house it is attached to. Compare that to the kitchen you stood in this morning. The oven you bought 8 years ago that already has a flashing F2 code on the panel. The repair tech who told you a control board would run $400 and the part is on back order for 6 weeks. The new range you priced at the appliance store last weekend at $1,200 before tax. The salesman who told you the 10-year warranty was actually a service plan and only covered parts, not labor. That oven was designed in a meeting room in Louisville, Kentucky, to fail in 11 years. The Amish oven was designed in the Rhine Valley in the early 1600s to last forever, and it does. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how that oven is built, what materials go into it, and the one specific detail buried in a 1972 Penn State Extension bulletin that explains why the bread coming out of one of these ovens is fundamentally different from the bread coming out of yours. You will know how to build a working version in your existing backyard this weekend for under $30 in materials. You will know the historical document where this design was first written down in English in the year 1858. And you will know the name of the lobbying campaign that quietly worked decade after decade to make sure no American suburban kitchen was ever built around one again. This is not for people building a new house. This is for the man or woman who already owns a home, already has a backyard, and is tired of writing checks for appliances designed to die on a schedule. The first time I walked behind a farmhouse outside Berlin, Ohio, in late September of 2017, the sun had already dropped behind the woodlot, and the air had that first sharp edge of fall in it. The man who ran the place, a fellow named Mose Byler, took me past the woodshed and stopped in front of what I thought at first was a small whitewashed smokehouse. It was about waist high, dome-shaped, and there was a small iron door on the front, no bigger than a foot square, with a tin chimney coming out the top. He opened the door. Inside, the firebox glowed at a temperature I would later measure with a borrowed infrared thermometer at 612 degrees Fahrenheit. He had lit a small fire of split oak 2 hours earlier and let it burn itself down to coals. He swept the coals out with a long-handled corn broom into a metal bucket. Then he took a damp rag wrapped around the end of a stick, swabbed the floor of the oven once, and slid in 9 loaves of dough on a long wooden peel. He closed the door. He looked at me. He said, 45 minutes, go drink your coffee. When the bread came out, it was the best loaf I've ever put in my mouth. Crust dark and crackling, crumb fine and tender. A faint sweetness that no commercial oven on earth can produce, because no commercial oven gets up to that temperature with that much retained heat in the walls of the chamber. I asked him what the oven cost to build. He thought about it for a minute. He said his father built it with him in 1971. The fieldstone came off their own land. The clay came from a creek bed half a mile away. The mortar was mixed on site. The only thing they paid cash for was the iron door and a small bag of hydrated lime. Total cash outlay in $1971, $19.40. Adjusted for inflation, that would be about $140 today. But Mose pointed out that you can build the same oven this year for around $30 if you scavenge your stone and clay locally, which you almost certainly can, because the materials are sitting under your boots right now. That oven has baked, by his estimate, somewhere north of 40,000 loaves of bread in 53 years. It has produced cookies, casseroles, dried apple slices, smoked sausage, pizza, and Sunday roasts. It has used roughly 1 quart of scrap wood per year, fuel that the family generates as a byproduct of routine woodlot maintenance, which means the fuel is also free. The total lifetime operating cost after the original construction has been $0. Now, I want you to understand what that oven is actually doing, because once you understand the physics, you will see why no modern range can compete with it on any axis except convenience. And even that one is more myth than fact. What you're looking at when you look at one of these ovens is a thermal mass battery. The walls of the dome are 8 to 12 inches thick. The floor is brick or flat fieldstone laid directly on a packed earth and gravel base. The dome itself is built from cob, which is just clay, sharp sand, and chopped straw mixed by hand and shaped by feel. The whole structure weighs somewhere between 400 and 800 pounds when it is finished and cured. When you build a fire inside it, the fire heats the air for about 10 minutes. After that, all the heat is going into the walls. For the next 2 hours, you are not cooking the air, you are cooking the clay. You are charging the mass like you would charge a battery. By the time the wood is burned down to coals, the inside surface of the dome is between 600 and 800 degrees Fahrenheit. The mass behind that surface, all the way through the 8 inches of clay and stone, is loaded with thermal energy. When you sweep out the coals and load the bread, the air inside the chamber drops fast. But the walls do not. The walls keep radiating heat at the bread, the floor, and the rising dough for the next 2 hours straight. After the bread comes out, the oven is still around 350 degrees, perfect for casseroles and roast chicken. 2 hours after that, it is around 180 degrees, perfect for drying apple slices, herbs, or jerky. By the next morning, it is still warm enough to keep a sourdough starter alive in a crock on the floor of the chamber. 1 firing, 12 hours of useful cooking heat, 1 quart of scrap wood per year. A modern electric oven does the exact opposite. It heats only the air. The moment you crack the door to check the bread, the air rushes out and the temperature crashes by 60 degrees. The element fights to recover. Energy is wasted. The bread cooks unevenly because there is no thermal mass behind the cavity. Your 2,000-watt oven uses more electricity in 4 hours of bread baking than the Amish oven uses in 50 years of operation, because the Amish oven uses no electricity at all. The roots of this design go back to the Palatinate region of Germany in the early 1600s. German peasant farmers in the Rhine Valley built their bake ovens directly into the back wall of the kitchen hearth, where the same fire that warmed the house also charged the bake chamber. When Mennonite and Amish settlers crossed the Atlantic in the 1720s and 30s, they brought the design with them. By 1750, there were bake ovens in nearly every farmhouse from Lancaster to Reading. By 1840, almost every Pennsylvania Dutch farmhouse had either an indoor bake oven built into the chimney or an outdoor bakehouse with the same equipment under a small shed roof. I tracked down a specific reference in a manuscript at the Lancaster Mennonite Historical Society. It is a builder's notebook kept by a man named Christian Funk between 1854 and 1861. Funk built farmhouses across Lancaster and Berks counties. On page 17 of his notebook, he writes the specification for what he calls the back oven: 3/8 of an inch of fire clay liner, 6 inches of cob, 2 inches of lime parging on the outside, iron door not less than 14 inches by 14 inches. He notes that the oven should sit on a foundation of fieldstone packed with sand to allow drainage and prevent frost heave. The door should face downwind of the prevailing weather, so that smoke does not blow back into the kitchen during the firing. The chimney should rise at least 24 inches above the dome to ensure draft. That same design, almost line for line, is the one Mose Baylor showed me in his backyard in 2017. The plans did not change because the plans were correct. There was nothing left to improve. So now ask yourself the obvious question. If this oven has been a known, working, refined design for nearly 300 years, why is it not in your kitchen? Why did your mother never have one? Why was the house you grew up in not built around one? The answer begins in 1928. That year, the American Gas Association launched what was called the Modern Kitchen Campaign. The campaign was a coordinated marketing and lobbying effort by the major utility companies, appliance manufacturers, and home builder associations. The goal, in their own internal documents now archived at the Hagley Museum and Library in Wilmington, Delaware, was to convince the American homeowner that the modern kitchen was a kitchen with a gas or electric range and nothing else. The bake oven, the wood stove, the cold pantry, the root cellar, all of it had to go. Not because they did not work. They worked perfectly well. They had to go because none of them generated a recurring revenue stream for a utility company. By 1955, federal mortgage guidelines under the Federal Housing Administration would not insure a home that did not have what they called a modern range hooked to either a gas line or an electrical service of at least 100 amps. By 1972, Penn State Extension was still quietly publishing bulletins documenting how to build and use a Pennsylvania Dutch bake oven, but those bulletins were no longer distributed at county fairs or 4-H meetings. They were filed in archives. By 1989, the American Society of Home Inspectors had added masonry bake ovens to a list of non-standard features that required disclosure during a real estate transaction, the same way you have to disclose an underground oil tank. Read what just happened in those 3 sentences. A piece of equipment that had served American farm families for 200 years was reclassified as a liability. Not because it was dangerous, not because it failed, because it could not be billed for. The Amish, of course, never noticed. They were not buying real estate transactions or reading FHA guidelines, they were baking bread. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You do not need to install a bake oven inside your existing house. You can build one outside in your backyard this weekend for under $30 in materials, and it will perform exactly as well as the indoor version, because the physics is identical. I want to walk you through the build the same way an Amish neighbor of mine walked me through it the first time. He calls it the Kleiner Backofen, the small bake oven, and it is the one he recommends to every English neighbor who ever comes to him asking how to start. First, find a flat patch of ground in your backyard that gets afternoon sun and is at least 10 feet from any wooden structure. Dig down 12 inches. Pack the bottom with 4 inches of clean gravel for drainage. On top of that, lay a 4-inch slab of fieldstone or recycled concrete pavers. This is your foundation. Cost $0 if you scavenge, about $10 if you buy. Second, source your clay. Real clay subsoil. Almost every backyard east of the Mississippi has it about 2 feet down. Dig a test hole. If the soil rolls into a worm between your palms and holds the shape, you have clay. Sift out the rocks and roots. You need about 100 pounds of clean clay. Cost $0. Third, mix the cob. The ratio the Amish use is 2 parts clay to 3 parts sharp sand to 1 part chopped straw. Mix it on a tarp by stomping it with bare feet. Add water until it has the consistency of stiff bread dough. The Amish do this with the help of 3 or 4 grandchildren who consider it the best afternoon of the year. Fourth, build a sand form. Heap up clean, dry sand on top of your foundation in the shape you want the inside of the oven to be. 24 inches across, 16 inches tall, dome-shaped. This is your mold. The sand will come out later. Fifth, pack the cob over the sand form, 6 inches thick. Build it from the bottom up, working evenly around the dome. Cut an opening for the door, 12 inches wide and 10 inches tall, before the cob sets up. Let the whole structure dry for 1 full week. When it is dry, dig the sand out from the inside through the door. The dome stays. You now have a working chamber. Sixth, install your door. A piece of 1/4-inch steel plate, 12 by 10 inches, with a handle bolted on. About $8 at any scrapyard. Or use a piece of cast iron from an old wood stove if you can find one for free. Seventh, smear a 1-inch lime parging on the outside of the dome. Lime is breathable, sheds rain, and slowly turns back into stone over the decades. A small bag of hydrated lime from a masonry supply runs $8 and is enough for 10 ovens. Total cash outlay if you scavenge stone and clay, between $28 and $32. Total time, about 10 hours of actual work spread across 2 weekends, mostly waiting for things to dry. What you have at the end of those 2 weekends is a piece of equipment your great-grandchildren will be using to bake bread when you're gone. Before I give you the final detail, one quick thing. Everything I have been digging out of these old Lancaster County notebooks and these Holmes County backyards, the cob recipe you just learned about, the dome geometry, the lime parging, the iron door spec, the wasserwisch I am about to walk you through, the breath line from the $8 fix video, the buried clay jar from the cooling trench video, the brick wall behind the stove from the heater video, and all the other pieces I've pulled out of plain country over the years. I've put it all in one place, room by room, season by season, in the order the families actually use it. It is called the Amish home system. Link is in the description. But stay right here, because what Christian Funk wrote on page 43 of his 1858 notebook is the one detail that turns an ordinary cob oven into an oven that bakes bread the rest of America has forgotten how to taste. Page 43 of the Funk notebook describes a step that almost no modern cob oven builder includes, because almost no modern cob oven builder learned the technique from someone who had actually used one for 50 years. The step is called, in Pennsylvania Dutch, the wasserwisch, the water wipe. After the fire has burned down and you have swept the coals out, before you load your bread, you take a wet cotton rag wrapped around the end of a stick. You swab the floor of the oven once, quickly, in a single motion across the brick. The water hits the 600-degree stone and flashes instantly to steam. The steam fills the chamber for about 30 seconds. Then you load your bread and close the door. What you have just done is create the conditions of a professional steam-injected European bread oven, the kind of equipment a small commercial bakery would pay $40,000 to install. The steam holds the surface of the dough soft for the first few minutes of baking, allowing the loaf to expand fully before the crust sets. When the steam clears, the dry retained heat of the oven bakes that crust to the dark, crackling, almost lacquered finish that is the signature of a real European loaf. You cannot get this from a home gas oven. You cannot get it from a home electric oven. You can get it from a steam-injected commercial bakery oven, which costs more than most cars. Or you can get it from a $30 pile of cob and stone in your backyard with a wet rag tied to a stick. The Amish have been doing this since the 1720s. Christian Funk wrote it down in 1858. Penn State Extension documented it in their Bulletin number 271 in 1972. Until tonight, the only reason most of you watching had never heard of it is that nobody who profits from the sale of an oven, the sale of bread, or the sale of natural gas has any reason to mention it. There is one more thing the Amish do that doubles the working life of the oven, and I almost did not include it because it sounds too simple to matter. After every firing, when the oven is cooled but is still warm, the woman of the house wipes the inside floor of the chamber with a clean, dry cloth. Just once. That dry wipe pulls out the last of the moisture before it has a chance to soak into the cob and cycle through a freeze and thaw next winter. An oven that gets that one extra minute of attention after every bake will last over 100 years. An oven that does not will start showing cracks in 20. The difference is 1 minute of work, performed by people who understood that an inheritance is worth 1 minute. You did not lose the right to bake real bread. Someone took it from you. They convinced you that bread came from a plastic bag, that ovens came from a showroom, that an oven that lasts 100 years was an unreasonable thing to want. The Amish never bought any of that. They kept building the ovens. They kept baking the bread. And now the design, the recipe, the technique, the wet rag on the stick, all of it is yours. If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect somebody else's profit margin, you already know what to do this weekend. You go out to the backyard, you look for the patch of ground that gets afternoon sun. You dig the test hole and check for clay. And in 2 weekends from now, you're pulling the first loaf of bread you have ever baked out of an oven you built with your own hands. I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me one specific thing. What is the food you would bake first? A sourdough loaf? A wood-fired pizza? An apple pie with the apples you dried in the same oven the day before? Tell me. And tell me what state you are in, because I keep an informal map of where the good clay is in this country, and I want to add yours to it. I read every comment. If this video gave you back something that was quietly taken from you, subscribe to the channel. We are not building a viewership here. We are building a community of people who refuse to be dependent on systems designed to bill them forever. Next week, I am bringing you the Amish technique for keeping a sourdough starter alive on the back of a wood stove for 60 years on the same culture, and the specific German document from 1789 that explains why no commercial yeast on the supermarket shelf will ever produce the same loaf. Until then, go find your clay. Go find your sand. Go find the iron door at the scrapyard. Build the oven your great-grandfather should have left you. Bake the bread your great-grandmother knew how to bake. The knowledge is yours again. What you do with it from here is up to you.